Edwin from Kenya, Oyintuji as well from Nigeria. Kenya and Nigeria, lovely. Caleb from Nairobi, Ibrahim from Nigeria. Great, we have a lot more people joining in. We will just start in a few more minutes. To everyone joining the call right now, welcome. Would love to know which city or country you're joining in from today.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Mordecai from Nairobi.
Hello, Mordecai. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you very much.
We have Salma from Nairobi as well. Okay, I believe that we've had a lot of people join in already. We can get started, and if more people join in, we can let them in during the session as well. Firstly, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to meet you. There are a lot more new faces here today. So hello, my name is Ritvi Garg. I am a startup partner at CloudPlexo. Okay, we have another person from Abuja. Welcome, Ivory. So what I do, right? So at CloudPlexo, we are an AI consulting platform native, and we work across the globe. We've been doing work with AWS as AWS Advanced Partners for about 5 years now, and we have offices across Nigeria and are headquartered in the UK. As I mentioned, for the past 5 years, we've been supporting businesses of all stages and industries with their technical development, as well as making sure that they are making the right technical decisions. And I'm very excited to expand that family to all of you now as well. Today, we're here to talk more about AgentSpec, a new product that Joseph is also going to shed more light on. And this session is very, very important for you and for me so that we can understand how the product works as well as what its implications are, which let me give you a foreshadowing, immense, endless possibilities. So today I have Joseph on this call with me, who is a very, very kind, very, very humble person, and also the maker and the man of Agentspec. He has been kind enough to answer a lot of our questions, which have been sent by you guys before the session. Please feel free to add in whatever questions you get, and I will be sure to ask Joseph them as well. Thank you so much for your time, Joseph, CTO of CloudPlexo. I'm very excited for this call today. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Eve. Doing great. It's a pleasure having each and every one of us here from different regions and country here on the call. Thank you.
Yes, we're very, very excited for this as well. So firstly, let's ease into the session, right? I'm sure that all of us have heard of agentic AI and how it's making like all of the rage in the world. But I do feel that there's a new shift from not only AI agents being a tool, but also for them to be sort of colleagues that are in your team. Do you also feel that shift? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So I could shift it into a different direction to say more or less like the world is actually moving, right, into intelligent automations. And then AI agents are more or less like they help us to be able to replace the repetitive tasks. So these are like the tasks that your colleagues get to do or you get to do, right? They help you to be able to be more or less like that third person within the process to be able to take away those set of burdens, right, within that system, and also have some set of things here on the screen where we have built more or less around smart automations and all that within that same space. So yes, it's not just more about having more stuff, right? Essentially, it's about building or having smarter systems.
Right. And so you mentioned the smarter systems. Is that what the gap you want to address while you were building AgentSpec, or what was the story behind that?
Yeah, so essentially, there was a need for us to move into this direction, right? To look and focus into what AI agents could beneficially do for organizations. So it all starts with looking at larger enterprises and SMEs. Now you see within those organizations, they have departments, they have units, and they could have like extensive kind of manual workflows that works within the system. So what we look at was more of a pain point to be able to say how do they increase starts within their organization? How could they try to create or bridge that gap between the manual process and then having an automated process. So what AgentSpec comes to do is to be able to create or reduce that gap, right, in terms of building repetitive tasks within the system, automate it just by you giving the agent some prompts, and then the agent is able to be able to build those automations for you out of the box, and then you be able to see how things work so well. So yes, this was part of the bigger problem we see within SMEs and enterprise, and why there was a need for us to look into how we could help organizations to be able to leverage an AI agent using Agentspec, which is more or less like a household brand name by CloudPlexo, to be able to solve and create this gap.
Okay, quite interesting. And I would also love to know what all can actually AgentSpec do, and I would love for you to expand on some of its key propositions.
Yeah, so essentially, just like your manual system today, right? It's not different from what you already have, right? In every system today or in every organization, they could have like maybe an HR onboarding process. They could have a reporting tool for like finances. They could have sales leads and all that. Just like what I say, they could be more or less like a manual process. So Agenspec comes into mind to be able to automate this process where you have just by a click of a button, once you've been able to give the right prompt to be able to create the workflow by a click of the button, Agenspec is able to integrate or work with these essential workflows that you have that ranges from what you have on your screen currently, where you have the procurement, operations, customer care. The list is quite exhaustive, right, on what these AI agents can do and what Agenspec would actually automate.
Very interesting. Given that it has so many use cases across the industry, I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to find a lot more use cases specific to different industries as well. Now, we have a few questions that were sent in before the session started, and I've taken the onus of putting them on slides. But if there are any other questions that the people here have for AgentSpec towards Joseph, please feel free to put that in the chat. But to start off, of course, you talked us through the fact that AgentSpec is the way to automate repetitive tasks. But also one question that is on our noses is, where is AgentSpec deployed, and where is the customer data processed as well? There's, of course, given that we are a global company and our clients are global as well, there's a question around how is the geography of that data controlled as well, which we would love for you to shed light on.
Okay, great. And we see or hear a lot of questions around how AgentSpec works in terms of deployment. A lot of customers get to ask, where does our data reside and all that. So I'll start off by saying, when you look into AgentSpec, one of the key things and one of the things about AgentSpec is this: AgentSpec essentially is being deployed within a customer's own environment. So that means ensure that data never leaves, right? It's within your own control, and security is enforced through your normal security network isolations. It has its own role-based access control within it, so there's a lot of strong authentication within the system. And also for us, right, it's a two-way thing, right? In as much as the customer controls the other part of how this data is being deployed, how the data sits within their environment. One year at CloudPlexo, building out AgentSpec, we ensure that encryption is top-notch, right? Starting from address to also at transit. And we also take cognizance of OAuth Source 10 to be able to build out AgentSpec to make sure that we are also in lines in terms of compliance and all that within the system, and also to be able to manage and audit these things for the customers and to prevent unnecessary data loss that could happen. So essentially, it stays within the customer's environment, but we assure our own beat in terms of security within the application.
So I think that is very important as well, because if you're providing companies with the automation, they need to trust it as well. So thank you so much for telling me that. You mentioned that the data never really leaves as it's on that environment. I would love for you to expand a little bit more about the security controls that are there to prevent a data leakage or the data being exposed for these workflows when we do work with these businesses.
Yes, so I'll give some level of context to it, right, in terms of security, right? And just like how you build your conventional applications today, you expect that your application should be able to have some set of controls in terms of maybe where the data might get to reside, right? You could say, okay, it could reside in a certain database and all that. It's not different from what AgentSpec is coming to do, right? AgentSpec is only giving you an interface to be able to build the workflow, and then you have total control on where your data should reside. So as part of your workflow that you create within AgentSpec, you could expect to say, I want all data to be resident within this database, which you have full control within that database, right? You could say, I want it to be in this particular repository, which you have full control over. So that's how the whole thing works around AgentSpec. So there's no point where customers need to get frightened to say, oh, do my data get to leak and all that within that same space. These are not like these are really not going to be the experience you should be having, right, from our own standpoint in terms of how this has been able to build out the system and how we've been able to see how best we could deploy it within your environment.
Right, definitely. And given that that is quite clear now that the data is all controlled by the client itself or the user of the interface, I think that also begs the question around, what mechanisms ensure that these agents operate strictly within these permissions that are assigned by the user. For example, if an agent does not make any unauthorized or unexpected API calls, given that it's already integrated.
Yeah, so looking at this, right, it's a very wonderful question. And thank you for bringing it up, right? It's one of the critical things we looked into building a agent spec essentially. So agent spec enforces what we call least privilege execution, right? Through a role-based permission. So when I say least privilege, so I'm essentially talking to a process where there are defined rules and there are defined rules on what who can do what within the system. So it is kind of very scoped within a service account, and there's a lot of policy-based controls. So the expectation is that agents can only, so I'm going to stress it out, right? I'm saying agents can only, the agents, right, that works within agents can only call explicitly whitelisted APIs using manage accounts. And then while during the execution time and yes, during the execution time, and also to try to prevent unauthorized or expected actions that could happen within that same profile.
Okay, very, very interesting. So this essentially means that it is on your environment, the data is safe, as well as everything is rule-based. I think that is one of the key factors that almost all companies look for in terms of security. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, let's move to the present, right? These are the things that will happen after the company has incorporated AgentSpec. But let's start with phase one, which is understanding how AgentSpec can be incorporated today itself. So I think the next question mentions this directly about how AgentSpec can scale alongside existing enterprise platforms and infrastructure that a company has.
So in terms of scalability, when it comes to agent spec, essentially agent spec is going to scale horizontally within the customer's environment, right? So when I say horizontally, I'm essentially saying within your normal orchestrations of compute you can have. When I say in terms of compute, I'm talking about your existing infrastructure that you've been able to have within your environment, right? So agent spec is going to work also within that same process to be able to scale horizontally within the customer's environment. So it's kind of integrating with the existing compute, right? That means existing infrastructure that has been created for it, and align with the enterprise or align with the business networking and monitoring tools.
Okay. So it's always incorporated horizontally in the existing infrastructure. And given that we also talked about how it can automate a lot of the repetitive tasks or the tasks that a company already takes on a day-to-day basis, I think that also begs the question around how can AgentSpec handle, like how many volumes can it handle of concurrent agent tasks? Because would there be like a performance degradation if too many agents are on at the same time, or what is the process around that?
And so I would say this is one of the key features of agent spec. So how does agent spec work today? Agent spec essentially supports some sort of high volume of concurrent agents, right? Tasks through distributed execution. So it's more or less to say, when I say distributed, I'm looking at a system where I said it's parallel. So it means each agent are working independent, right, of the other, right, depending on whatever use case. So I could have like a workflow that has been created and somebody is triggering that workflow and somebody else is also triggering that same workflow. They create an individual agent that work in parallel, right? They just work that within that system. They are able to handle a whole lot of workloads, isolations, and also auto scale it. So how does it work in terms of you being able to take up this workloads? Now, because we are AWS Advanced Partner, right? We leverage on AWS services. So the likes of the agents are essentially residing within Bedrock on agent spec. Now, this has been workload into a place where it can take as much load within your system. And that's why, as part of our setup within the customer's environment, we must also make sure that these services that have been deployed within this customer's environment have the capability to be able to upskill, right, within its own space. So that's what happens within agent spec and gives this agent spec this ability to be able to take high workloads and then still not losing out on its own performance within that same period.
Okay, quite interesting. Thank you for adding in that that key idea about it being based on Amazon Bedrock. And of course, we know how secure AWS is. That gives it an added layer of protection. We did mention about it being on AWS, so that also begs the question of what are the changes that have to be done on existing data sources and applications, if there are any, if a company wants to incorporate AgentSpec into its day-to-day workflows.
So today, agentspec essentially do not need some set of tweaking to be able to work within your environment. So it's more or less like a lift and a shift, right, into the customer's environment. So when we look into data source, right, so I'll keep, for example, right, and to say everything that happens around agentspec is all around permissions. Right. So I could essentially want to have a workflow that has to integrate with maybe a third-party system like a CRM, right? Or could actually want to integrate with maybe a database, right? What AgentSpec is going to do is to ask you for permissions. So what permission does it need? It needs some set of authorization that will come from you to say, okay, give me, if it's a credential that it needs within that system, you're going to provide that credential. So essentially, you are not breaking your system to be able to work with AgentSpec. You're using your existing system. You're using what you have in your existing system to be able to work. So if you say creating a new credentials for AgentSpec to work with, if you see it looks more or less like a change, right, to the existing system, then fine, then we can say it's a change. But essentially, it's not a change, because every application layer you have, or every wonderful applications that is being built, essentially would need some set of permissions that are being given by some controlled team. So this is like the team providing these credentials, and then AgentSpec is able to have access to it to be able to perform whatever workflow you try to create within that same space.
Right. So this lift and shift is quite interesting specifically because it also shows that a company can easily add into it in the workflows without any additional sort of training that it has to give to its employees, which is very interesting. And kind of like what we talked about, the shift towards the AI being a colleague rather than just a tool that you have to learn and build with. So that is very, very interesting. Another question in the same line, I know you talked about, integration already, but would also love to know what sort of, data sources or platforms and tools does AgentSpec natively integrate with already?
Yeah, so for us right now, I would say we have an exhaustive list, right, on the set of tools that AgentSpec could essentially connect to, right? I'm more focused at this point is what tool as an organization do you need AgentSpec to connect to, right? So we walk towards on that direction to be able to say, I'm having an organization today that has some set of tools, right, that they feel they need AgentSpec to be able to connect to. If it's not part of my toolkit, it is our responsibility in CloudPlexo, right, to be able to make sure that we can customize this for you and be able to get access to your tool, because in the nutshell, there are a whole lot of tools in the world and we can't essentially exhaust each of them. But in terms of what it can, we have up to 20,000 plus tools already available integrated into AgentSpec that AgentSpec can essentially have control over to be able to work in terms of building workflows for you.
Lovely. It sounds like the agent is already set for all of these people. If there's so many integrations already there. But that is very, very cool. I feel like it's already personalized for so many industries and so many businesses that, as you said, a shift and drop is the right way forward. So if this is the last question that we have from you guys that submitted before the session, if there's any other question that you have, any of the attendees, please feel free to push that in the chat box. But as we talked a little bit more about, Joseph, about, APIs as well as connecting AgentSpec to all of these other integrations. How much effort is required to do that? Because you mentioned that a lot of third-party services are also already integrated, but how much effort is required on the user side to establish that connection again?
Yeah, so from a user's perspective, let me try to be funny a little. It only takes you your keyboard and your mouse. So all you need to do is just click and type compute, and then you can have whatever connection you want to have with any third-party tools. So it's more or less an interactive section once you are trying to build a workflow around an agent. So you would ask some set of questions, it could reply you back with some set of questions or set of responses, and maybe if it needs clarity, you could ask for it. So it's more or less like a conversation you are having till you get to a point where you know, okay, I've been able to have this. And so if it needs access to your API, it's going to be asking you, what API do you want to connect to? Can you provide API? So that's why I said it's more or less like a click and then just you typing on your keyboard. Just as easy.
Very good. You've made the next good AI then, Joseph. You're taking everything by storm. That is really nice. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us present in this meeting. I think that if nothing else, it gives us a very good overview about what AgentSpec can do and the applicability it has on so many industries. This is, of course, the first of a series of sessions that we will have. I cannot make sure that you will have the insights that Joseph gave us on this one, but you are here and please feel free to ask any questions that you have at the moment. But yes, this is another great session, and we hope to bring a lot more of these being in terms of questions. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll just wait for a few seconds if anybody has any. But in terms of if you're interested to know more about AgentSpec as well as understand through demos, which is always very helpful, we do have a website that I'll be putting in the chat right now, on which you can have demos as well as use cases and sort of understand how AgentSpec works in person. And we can also have assessments. Yes, exactly. The link is already shared around AgentSpec. That's the website that we have for the product. And if anybody's interested in sort of understanding how that will look like specific to their business, please feel free to reach out. And I'm pretty sure there's a link in the chat that's being added right now that you can book a call at. But we have Joseph for a few more minutes here. So if anybody has any questions to ask the maker, this would be the right time. I believe the hello, Afiz. So I can take this question. Afiz is asking if we have a video or a guide manual created to show us around with a few example workflows. We do. If you go to the website, there's a link for a few demos as well as on the YouTube channel. I'll put the link for that as well. There are 2 demos currently, but we're working on pulling a lot more out. So you'll be able to see a lot of industry use cases that have been about since forever. I think, Joseph, this is a question for you. So in the public sector, most governments use their local cloud providers instead of the public cloud. Does AgentSpec integrate with other cloud providers other than AWS?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's the answer for you, Franklin. It does. So we have a link in the chat now, which you can use to book a demo for AgentSpec to understand better how it can work around your business. If you do have a use case as well, we're open to having a look at it. Please feel free to have that in the chat as well. And then we can see if we can make something out of it as well. I believe that if there are no other questions, please feel free to visit the website as well as to learn more. Thank you, Shekhar, for joining in. If there are no other questions, you can go to the website, learn a little bit more, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to book a session on the Calendly link that is in the chat. So, Joseph, there's a question in the chat bot how it can be used in schools management, if that's something you'd like to take.
Yes. So just like what we said earlier, I'm going to reiterate it. Agent spec is used for building repetitive workflows. Essentially, it's used for building workflows. So if the school management system is more or less like a workflow, yes, it can be used building those workflow. So whatever is the use case around this school management system, yes, agent spec can work alongside to be able to build it. But agent spec, it's not a tool used in building a website, or essentially used in building softwares.
And of course, I would also like to add in that the beauty of Agent Spec is that first, it's very easy to use. It's like prompting, but also it's very specific about what you want it to do. So the implication is really based on the problems you want to solve, and Agent Spec can make that a reality. I think that is our cue, Joseph, for ending this session. I would love for you to have some final thoughts to say to the people present here, to just wrap the session off.
Yeah, so it's to me it's more or less like a wonderful section being here with you to be able to speak or talk more around agent spec and then what agent spec is doing. My goal, or what I will see more or less to see an add-on for me, is to be able to see users try to interact with the system. And here on the call, I'm literally saying that if you have AI use cases that have to do with you building workflows, right, for your organization, and then it's more or less like a burden need for your organizations to be able to take most of your repetitive tasks to more or less like an automated way where AI agents can do it. Agent spec is here, and also I will be providing this set of organization free trials for them to come to agent spec, onboard on agent spec, invite their team members, and then get to use within those few tries to start to enjoy the benefits of all the add-on features and the wonderful features to which agent spec can essentially give us. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Joseph, for that high note. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Please feel free to book a session or learn more on agentspec.ai. Thank you so much for joining in. Have a very good day ahead. Bye-bye.